Chapter 26 Squeak. Aunt Witch brewed some tea and put some non-magical scones on the kitchen table for them to enjoy while Anthea explained the situation. Elle almost didn't even notice the miniature teacup and saucer she laid out on the table for Anthea. They were so small, but a perfect size for an ant. Elle enjoyed the tea, but wasn't interested in the scones because of how much bread and other treats they just ate while floating in the air. In fact, they were feeling so full they could barely drink the tea, but it was too good to give up altogether. Not only had Elle experienced the adventure firsthand, but they weren't very interested in hearing it for the 100th time. They started to zone out, staring towards the kitchen window which gave a perfect view to the garden outside, not too far from the house. They were mindlessly staring at the plants when noticed a few of the vegetables hop off the vine and start bobbing towards the house. At first, Elle was surprised by this, until they looked closer. The plants looked as if they were waving and moving, but if they looked even closer, they could tell they were covered in ants. It seemed like the ants did a lot of housework for Aunt Witch in exchange for food and a safe place for them to live. Then they thought about the ants that took the levitating cookies away. Were the ants not concerned with the entire colony suddenly floating away? Maybe they were immune. There was a lot about Aunt Witch that Elle didn't know, especially why she was a baking witch when she had so many ants around. It seemed kind of dangerous, but they seemed to respect Aunt Witch for everything she does for them in return. Elle smiled, thinking about what life must be like living with a colony of ants when they heard Anthea calling their name.
Elle! Elle! Hello? Are you there?
Anthea said, poking Elle's arm.
We've been discussing ways to get you home. Have you been listening?
Elle shook their head and gave a worried smile. Anthea sighed and ran the plan through Elle. The colony of ants have tunnels that run all through this forest. If they were able to safely shrink Elle down to ant size, they would be able to take the route to Elle's side of the forest in no time. There was no direct path to their house on the hill, but there were ant hills scattered across the forest close enough to the edge to get Elle back home safely. Anthea disappeared for a few minutes to fetch a map of the colony's tunnels that she kept in her study. She spread it out on the table, and although the contents were ant-sized, there were so many paths that the map ended up filling the whole table. Judging by the map, Aunt Witch's house was closer to Elle's hill than they thought. This was good news. Although Anthea was enjoying her adventures with Elle, she had a lot of catching up to do with her work and studies, and she didn't want Elle to be away from their family any longer than they had to be. They planned out the route they could take that was the fastest while also safest. Just because they were traveling inside the tunnels of the ants didn't mean they were safe from danger. There were many underground animals that often interfered with their tunnels, not to mention predators that ate the ants. The further they traveled from Aunt Witch's yard, the more common anteaters were. After finalizing their route, it was time to prepare for the travel. Aunt Witch started to bake up fresh batches of shrinking and growing buns for Elle to pack. Once they reached their destination, they would need to grow back to their normal size. She baked a few extras in case they were to run into any danger and needed to get away at normal speed. Anthea gathered a few things from her study and replaced the potions and pills she took while out with Elle. They met up in the kitchen and Aunt Witch gave Anthea the shrinking and growing buns to put in her bag, then handed a shrinking roll to Elle.
Good luck, kiddo! I had fun messing with you,
she said, winking. Elle looked at Aunt Witch, then gave her a tight hug. Elle was so close to home and thankful for her help. Who knows where they would be right now if it weren't for Anthea and Aunt Witch's help. Elle popped the bun in their mouth and almost immediately shrunk. They heard a squeak. Elle looked to the right and saw a mouse, larger than them. To their left, Anthea, who, this time, was standing taller than Elle.